Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
So I thought we'd talk about something that happened this week with Elon. He did an interview with Recode, and he talked with Kara Swisher, and lots of interesting stuff in that interview. Mm-hmm. Again, this we love Elon discussions, and here he was a little bit more relaxed.
He's definitely had, it seems like, some more time on his plate in general.
He's actually only working 80 or 90 hours a week. Now, when he said that, and I was like, oh, good, down from 120, I was like, wait, 80 or 90? And I started to just do a little math in my head. If he's actually working all those hours, that's an insane amount of work. And for him, it's like, oh, 80, 90.
Right,
but
that's sustainable for him.
Interesting that he talked about anything over 80, there's an exponential curve for him, at least, above 80. I feel like for me, it's above 40. But
yeah.
For him, it gets exponentially harder above 80. And then he says it starts to affect his sleep and his mood and all that.
He doesn't even get paid overtime.
He doesn't. He gets paid $1.
Yeah.
I mean, do you realize that?
That's so crazy.
It's not like he's like, oh, yeah, I'm getting overtime now.
Right.
No, just does it. He did this on Halloween night.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. He's got kids.
Elon.
I thought he was busy.
Elon, shouldn't you be taking your kids out trick-or-treating?
Are they too? Maybe they're too old. They probably got that age where like, Dad, leave me alone.
Oh, that sucks.
Anyway, so she started talking about tweeting, and she seemed to be very upset about the tweeting he had done and the trouble he had gotten into, and so she kind of kept harping on him. She said, like, when do you normally tweet? And he said,
at night when he gets home for about 10 to 15 minutes. And this is really accurate. We have on our newsroom a thing that every time he tweets we get a notification. Yeah, it's basically always at night, and it's always for 10-15 minutes. So for 10-15 minutes you're just like, oh my god,
right.
another tweet, oh my gosh, and then it stops, and then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's usually just cool stuff that he's tweeting about. It's not usually like inflammatory, crazy stuff.
No, it's about things that he's interested in.
Yeah, like Star Wars or
SpongeBob.
Right. Just
meaning of life.
Anime.
And so every now and then he does tweet about something like shorts, but Swisher was like, why are you always tweeting, getting in trouble? Right. And he's like, I don't, I just do that occasional little tweet.
Right.
And I think that was good to put it in perspective. Then she asked, aren't you going to have to change your Twitter behavior? And I thought this was really revealing because I thought he was going to say like, oh yeah, starting in 12 days, I'm going to have to stop. He was like, no, not really.
Keeping in mind that he usually just tweets about SpongeBob.
I mean, he said, I won't be able to tweet anything that will materially change the value of the stock. Okay, but basically, it's not. I'm glad. I thought he was going to have to, like, someone's like, stop tweeting about anything crazy. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, as long as it doesn't have to do with the material value of the stock. So, yay. And he said that Twitter for him was like a way to learn things and a way to dip into the consciousness of the world. Pretty cool that he stays connected, because think about most CEOs. They sit in their little ivory tower. They have a few henchmen that are saying, yes, sir, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. But he goes deep, and people, I mean, on Twitter, as you know, as soon as you tweet something, there's tons of people who are like, you're stupid. Mm-hmm. And there's tons of people who are like, wow, that's cool. But he's getting to feel that stream of consciousness.
Right.
Then he talked about the FBI, closing in, and he said that Wall Street Journal headline was utterly false, and that it was outrageous, and that they're terrible people, these journalists. Mm-hmm. Not saying all journalists.
Right.
He's saying the journalists who would just basically write something to get eyeballs as opposed to reporting on the truth.
Right.
And he said that basically they're inverting the good-bad feedback loop. And basically, they're not journalists anymore at that point. They're ad salesmen. Right. They're learning how to, if I send this news story, I'll get more eyeballs, which will mean more money for my newspaper.
It's clickbait. And, we've seen this on YouTube, newspaper headlines, whatever has the most shock value, you're going to click on because you need to see it.
She asked about him being overly thin-skinned, and he said, I only respond to about 1% of the tweets, so he said, I don't think I'm overly thin-skinned about it. He's like, rockets and cars, those are very demanding. I have a strong interest in the truth, more than journalists do, and I think my fans are great, not rabid. She was asking, like, don't you think your fans are just these rabid people who will just do anything for you? And he's like, no, I think they're great. Right. And I'm glad that he stood up for them.
Right.
He really went into how monumentally difficult it is to run a car company. And I think for those of us who just look from the sidelines, it is easy to forget this. He keeps pointing it out a lot of times. He did here again, that Ford is the only other American car company besides Tesla that hasn't gone bankrupt. And I think it's easy to forget that. He's basically saying this is like the most difficult thing you can think of, rockets and cars.
Right.
And he's able to do it.
And he had to explain this to Kara a couple times because I don't think she quite understood that, like, his 120-hour work weeks and the crazy stuff that they had to do at Tesla to make it work were not just because he wanted to do it that
Right.
way. It was the only way to keep the company in business.
Right.
You can't just sort of relax and be like, it's okay. We'll just be not profitable for another 3 quarters or
Right.
something. Like, you can't do that as a business. And I don't know. I kind of got the sense that she was like, why did you do all that stuff,
Exactly.
Elon?
Why didn't you just take it easy?
Right.
This amazing part that gets lost because Elon doesn't toot his own horn. He worked 100 hours a week, but he also got all of his employees and team to work excruciating hours as well. They
Right.
all followed him along. We don't read in the press that, like, I'm tired of working for Elon. They just do it because they know that he's working towards this amazing cause, and they're willing to give of themselves for that.
Right. And
That's incredible.
And after you work at Tesla, let me just point out, huge respect and credit goes out to people who work at Tesla. Like, not because of sustainability or anything like that, but because they know how hard it is to work there. So people who have Tesla on their resumes are way up there. I'll tell you because I've been on some, decisions or whatever where people are talking. And anytime anyone has any Tesla experience, whether they were an intern or they work there, it's like, ooh, Tesla.
So he pointed out that they've basically pushed other car companies to do what they're doing. Like,
I thought he was being really conservative.
he really was.
I mean, he was saying that, like, maybe we pushed car companies forward 5
or
years.
10 years, right?
5 or 10? No way.
No, he's
They
wrong.
would have stayed on this gravy train until it fell off the bridge.
Exactly.
Like, there would be no electric cars. There would be none of these 2020 EV cars that are potentially going to be coming out. We wouldn't see the I-Pace. We wouldn't see the e-tron.
No.
These would have...
All because of him.
Yeah, they would have just been sitting on a shelf somewhere in some executive's office as like a potential idea, but that got mothballed because...
We don't need to sell EV cars. We can just keep making diesels.
And when we keep talking about how quickly we have to get rid of carbon dioxide, he's the one working the hardest on this planet towards
Absolutely.
doing that. So, I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he shamed Kara about her lack of driving an electric car.
Right.
He asked her, like, offhandedly, like, what do you drive? And she's like, I drive a Ford. And he was like, why aren't
you driving an electric
stop.
car?
Why aren't you driving an electric car? And she gave some pretty lame excuses. She was like, well, I walk a lot. I take public transportation. And it's like, he's like, how'd you get here?
Yeah. Oh, I drove
I drove.
here. There's no excuse when you're Kara Swisher.
Yeah, you're in Silicon Valley. I mean, hello.
And she's rich.
Right.
It's not like she's some college student who's thrown
Right.
together this thing.
Buy a used Leaf if you want something
Right.
cheap. Like, and then he admitted that this year was a horrible year in terms of just how much toll it's taken on him. That he said it feels like 5 years. It took all of them working together on this problem, like Deepak and JB. Like, they were all basically every day just solving problems.
Right.
Which I'll bet for Elon was also awesome. Like, every day getting to solve problems. He's an engineer at heart. And then he talked about their suppliers. So they've got over 10,000 suppliers. And when they've got a 6-month time span. So when you need to do something, you have to wait 6 months for the parts to come in, and you have to wait for the slowest part. So he said it's like a flotilla of super tankers. So it's not like you can just solve a problem and, like, the next day you've got your parts. You've got to wait for those parts. So you wonder why it was production hell. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, we figured out how that robot works.
Right.
You now have to wait for all the parts to come in properly.
Right.
Like, and even the one little stupidest widget, if that doesn't come in, you can't finish the car. Why do you think they were piling up the cars in factories waiting for some stupid part to arrive?
Right.
He talked about tweeting out some things that he did admit that he said, going back, I probably shouldn't have tweeted a couple of those things. And he said his brother Kimball said to him, look, I understand sometimes you do a self-inflicted wound, right? You say something stupid. But he said, why did you then twist the knife?
Right.
Like, so if you stab yourself in your leg, okay, but then don't twist the knife afterwards. And
Right.
so his brother Kimball knew that there were times when he could have just backed off and probably made it easier for himself, and he didn't. He talked about the whole Ambien thing that everyone had brought up, like, oh, are you addicted to Ambien? He's like, no, I just couldn't go to sleep if I didn't take something, and we needed to get this problem solved. So think about the sacrifice he made. He knew he had to do this, and that was his solution. Sleep on a couch, take Ambien sometimes.
I think that there are better solutions.
Sure, but what I'm saying is it worked. Like, now that we've gotten through the production hell and we can see the other side, he did it. And if that's what he had to do it, why aren't the headlines, oh my God, CEO sacrifices self for the greater good of humanity?
Right.
That's the headline.
Right.
The good news, he said, Tesla is in a pretty good position right now. He said that up until September, we had to solve all these problems, but now we're at 5,000 a week, and that's normal for us now. But he said 6,500 cars a week would be tons of overtime. So I thought this was very revealing. They're at a point now where 5,000's solved. But to get to the next step is going to take some more lines or some more, automation.
Yeah. He's talking about improving neural nets, 8 cameras running 8 neural nets.
Yeah, so basically their computer, just keep this in mind.
Yeah.
Each camera is a network that has to be calculated. So their onboard hardware is basically solving 8 threads at a time.
Right.
That's amazing. There's path planning going on. They're solving for a wide range of corner areas. So a corner area he pointed out was you might be driving down the road and you see skid marks. You, as a human, know that, oh, okay, that's a skid mark. It's not a line I should follow. But a computer has to learn that,
right,
like a baby would.
Yep.
That's pretty amazing because we don't think about how hard that is. Or he said wrong painted lines. A lot of times you're driving down the road and there's some construction at some point and there's some line just out of nowhere. You kind of ignore it as a human. But again, the computer's been told it's a line, it's important.
Right.
And now it has to go, oh wait, is it? Think how complicated that is, all because some, road wasn't painted properly. He was talking about the fact that all humans, all creatures have eyes, and that's how we navigate through the world. And basically that is his way of making Teslas work. And he said you can be superhuman with just cameras.
It does make sense. I mean, if you had 8 eyes,
yeah, then you're a spider.
Forward and spiders don't even have this. They don't have eyes behind them.
No, that's true. Then she asked about sensors in the roads. She was like, Mercedes is working on putting sensors in the roads, and he's like, you need a general solution that works worldwide. So he said, yeah, it's possible that like you be able to figure out how to make a car drive in a certain situation or a certain city, but that's not what we're doing. We want it to work in general. Plop it on any road, anywhere in the world, it'll work.
Right. That's really, really, really important. He was saying that some of their competitors like Lucid, Google, Uber, they don't have a general solution.
He said no one's close to general self-driving. No one will achieve self-driving before Tesla, and we will have full self-driving next year.
Right.
Now, again, this may be Elon time. It may not be accurate.
It might not be next year. Maybe it's the year after.
But the fact that he's not given up on it, because I think myself included, I think a lot of people heard when he didn't do the Los Angeles to New York autonomous driving trip, they're like, oh, see, can't do it.
Right. And in a lot of cases in life, if someone doesn't do something in the time frame that they say that they're going to do it, it means that they weren't ever going to be able to possibly achieve it.
He said he could have cheated. He could have mapped out the route and done it.
Right.
And no one would have been the wiser. They would have just been like, oh my God, I did it.
Right.
He didn't want to do that. He wanted to do it legit.
The reason why is we can see, look at Waymo's car can pick people up autonomously and drive them around.
Right.
It's in a mapped city.
Right.
It's mapped. It's like if you had, it's the difference between having a frontiersman that you drop into the middle of the wilderness and can just sort of survive on the land, and like a millennial walking around with his smartphone going like, I wonder where the coffee shop is. Let me just type it in, and then as soon as it goes dead, he's like, I'm lost. How am I gonna get home? That's the difference between the two of them.
I thought an interesting part of the discussion went to talking about the short sellers, and for the first time that I've heard, Elon talked about their damage to his brand. And that was the whole reason for wanting to go private. He was like, I knew it would be a lot of work to go private, but I knew that once we were private, we wouldn't have to have all this brand damage. And so obviously we know they haven't gone private, but he admitted basically that these short sellers are causing brand damage. And I think it's important to point that out, that what they get to pull off with all this FUD all the time is all these people who aren't familiar with the brand keep getting a negative connotation about the brand, which means they won't go sit in a Tesla. Mm-hmm. And that does hurt a company because those people could have maybe sat in a Tesla sooner and woken up to what it's all about. She asked about new products, and he said, oh, we definitely do have secret products. When I heard that, I was just like grinning ear to ear. That means that there's so much more fun stuff coming.
Because there's already so many exciting products.
Yes, that we know about.
Right. There's the Semi, there's the Model Y, there's the pickup truck.
He said that he's had an electric VTOL, so that's a vertical takeoff and landing airplane, in his head for 9 years. And he's actually written some stuff down on paper. Okay, so when you're thinking about a company and the value of a company, that means that's coming someday when they've got a little time on their hands.
Absolutely.
But yeah, let's go to the pickup truck. So he said this pickup truck, he is personally most excited about this. It's super futuristic, cyberpunk, heart-stopping. I don't know if a lot of people will buy this truck or not, but I don't care. I've been iterating it with Franz. It has lots of titanium. It'll probably be for a niche audience. And then maybe, if we need to, we'll make a more conventional one.
This is, I just love this because so many companies will be like, what do the customers want?
Yeah, focus group. Focus group.
Let's get a focus group.
How many cup holders would you like?
Right. People love classic cars. And I just want to think about classic cars. There were no focus groups back in those days. It wouldn't have been like, what kind of headlights do you guys want?
They had amazing designers who were given carte blanche to just
I
design.
have a vision of what I want this to look like.
No one thought about fins before some designers designed them.
Right.
And then we were like, that's cool.
That's cool. Let's make bigger ones.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was like, let's make boring stuff because we have to make our cars fuel efficient boring because we use conventional engines that are so inefficient you're throwing away 80% of them.
So, I mean, he's talking about a cyberpunk futuristic pickup truck. And
that they'll sell.
Even if, the vast majority of people want something different and they have to change it eventually, but the core of the truck is going to be built out of passion.
It's so cool, man.
Passion.
Yeah. When was the last time you saw like a truck going down the road and you were like, wow, that looks great? It was from the 30s. It was from the 40s.
You can feel it when any product is built out of passion.
Right.
You may not agree with its aesthetics. You might be like, oh, that's too whatever for me. But I can see the beauty of it. I'm so excited about the pickup truck.
Yeah.
They talked about a bunch of other stuff. The fact that they're going to be on Mars, hopefully in 2024, because that's the next window. That it might be a manned mission at that point. I mean, there's another window in 2027. So, I mean, let's keep our eyes peeled for those two windows because some exciting stuff is going to be happening then, we hope. Just the fact that he said, I don't know if I'm going to go to Mars or not on that mission shows that he wants to go to Mars.
Right.
Like,
I hope that he doesn't. I want him safely here on Earth just for a little bit longer until, SpaceX has gotten into a routine of sending people. I don't want him stuck on Mars because his tweets are going to be 18 minutes late.
They talked about that Eric Garcetti, the mayor of LA, is a backer, is a supporter, and that he's basically completed this 6,000-foot tunnel in Hawthorne, which you're seeing a video here of him walking backwards in the tunnel. That's amazing to me because they only started that tunnel just, it seems like, a year ago.
Right.
And now they've got a mile test tunnel. Think of what they've learned. Right.
Right.
That's incredible. What bugged me about the interview, though, as soon as he started talking about tunnels, he really started to open up and talk about all this cool engineering they figured out. He's talked to heads of engineering at tunnel boring companies, and they don't know their limitations. He was like, what? You don't even know your own limitations? You know why? Because I guess they were just like...
They're complacent.
Right. They're just like, well, we just bore a hole and we charge billions of dollars for it.
Right.
They weren't considering how to be better at it. Anything he's touched in his life, he has realized that it's way behind where it should be.
Right. He's revolutionized so many things from PayPal, which was the first way to do online banking.
This is how you do banking?
Right.
I can do it better.
Right. Using the internet, which is this new thing. Right. Check it out. And then, electric cars. Hi, yes, this is an electric car. It's sweet. Check it out.
Right.
It's super cool. And I'm going to eventually make the fastest car in the world 100% electric.
He starts talking about the boring machine and how basically they were using diesel locomotive engines to get the stuff out. And he was like, why are you doing that? That's so much harder, longer, expensive. Fumes. Why not use a Model 3?
Right.
So they just built
made a Model 3 work on the rails.
Boom, done. And I mean, and she just lost interest. You could tell at that point in the interview, she's like, okay, that sounds kind of boring. And it was like, no, this is really interesting stuff. He was talking about the fact that the power input to the machine was way underrated, that you can put way more power into those machines. They just didn't know that. And so she kind of lost interest at that point. But
it was
I'm like,
so interesting to hear, like, oh, in order to get any kind of cable that makes sense to go all the way into the tunnel and power your device, it would have to be hundreds of kilovolts, and then you have to have a bunch of transformers in there generating heat to get it back down.
Right.
Much easier to just have a battery.
Or how about this?
Wow.
The tunnel built in LA for the subway, $1 billion a mile.
Right.
He just finished a mile-long tunnel in LA. How much did it cost? $10 million. He just lowered the cost, not by one order of magnitude, but by two. On his first try.
Right.
That was his first tunnel.
It's amazing.
What?
So much interesting stuff in there, and I wish you would have just let him talk about it more.
I know. They talked about the fact that Tesla, this gets very little press, but they've been 100 for 100 score on the LGBTQ rating as a company for years now, 4 or 5 years. 100 out of 100. Like, he cares about stuff like that. And so he makes that a priority. I hadn't heard this before. I guess he took up sumo wrestling 5 years ago. And in 5 minutes, he hurt his back and he's been paying the price for the past 5 years.
So take that off my to-do list.
Yeah,
I don't need to do sumo wrestling.
I would love if anyone has a video out there of Elon doing sumo wrestling. I would just kill to see it. He did apologize at the end to some of the journalists that he tweeted to. He said he shouldn't have picked online fights with so many of them. They started talking about scooters for some reason at the end, and he said that scooters just make you look bad when you're on a scooter.
I'll take that.
He said that Tesla probably will work on an electric bike.
Sweet.
Every time there's an opportunity to talk to Elon, I feel like you're getting a glimpse into the mind of a genius, right? I mean, if we had recorded interviews with some of the greatest geniuses of all time, right, that, before recordings, it would be invaluable to us, right? And I just feel like if you get an hour with him, make the most out of it. I'm not saying that Kara Swisher isn't a good interviewer. I've seen her interview lots of people, and I find her very interesting. But I feel like with Elon, you have to go above and beyond.
Right. It seemed like she thought that she knew what he was talking about a lot of the time. And maybe she does, but you're an interviewer. You're interviewing for people who maybe don't know.
Right.
So let him talk. Let him explain what he's talking about, because it's some really interesting stuff. And I was thinking about, what if we get to interview Elon, which could happen.
Well, let's talk about this. I mean, he's going to be on Ride the Lightning podcast with Ryan McCaffrey in 2 or 3 weeks. He just tweeted out.
Right.
That's fantastic. We're really psyched for you, Ryan, to talk to him. And I'm sure Ryan's going to do a great job because he's a wonderful podcaster. Mm-hmm. And that is something I'm really excited about, because I feel like that's going to be more freeform, more like Joe Rogan.
Right. That was a great interview because it was long form. Mm-hmm. I think that it needs to be long form. Yep. You can't confine Elon to sound bites. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just doesn't work.
Elon's a CEO. He's ready with some answers. If you ask him some questions that have been asked before, he'll give you the set answers. We heard that on this interview.
Right.
It's when you get him off the path and into some new area that he's not got sound bites ready for, where you really get the full. And Boring Company, here's the thing, privately held company. Do you notice that when you go to Boring Company talk,
he's excited.
He's excited. He doesn't have to hold back anything. There's no shareholders to worry about, no SEC. It's just he can talk however he wants.
Right. And I mean, we did hear some stuff that we haven't heard before.
Right.
It's all about disruption. He is a disruption machine.
Yes.
He's all about disrupting things. So when you're talking to him about boring stuff, he's bored.
Yeah.
Not boring company stuff, but when you're talking about boring stuff
like
to
margins
do with
on
boring
cars
companies,
exactly.
not the boring company.
Right.
He gets bored about talking about that. But when you're like, tell me about this pickup truck, Elon.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear more about that pickup truck.
Damn.
It's so exciting.
That's going to be so cool to
know.
have. It's going to be so badass looking. How bored are you of seeing pickup trucks on the road?
I know.
I mean, we live in a place where there's a lot of pickup trucks, and they all look roughly the same. Big front kind of grill that just says,
and overbuilt. Like, a lot of it is there's just air in there just to make it look bigger.
It's very true. Yeah.
Do you see what's so great about Elon? He just makes life exciting. Like, everything he's working on makes you want to wake up in the morning and find out more. And that's, again, why I look forward to his tweets and his products. And it's everything about what he does is just moving us forward.
Right.
And thank you for coming along for the ride on this in-depth of his Recode interview with Kara Swisher. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I recommend you listen to the whole thing.
I hope that someday in the future we will have an in-depth where Elon is sitting with us.
I think that's going to happen.
We're going to ask him a bunch of questions. We're going to have to come up with some really good questions.
Oh, yeah. We're going to put a lot of work into that.
That's going to be, I think I might take a week off and just come up with good questions to ask. And yeah, we'll just have like an 8-hour interview or something like that.
Maybe in the Roadster.
I don't know if we can. Yeah.
I would love to do it in the Roadster.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can hear anything or if we can talk.
It's so funny.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of In Depth.
And thanks you to our Patreons for supporting us, because you guys are super special and you make this all possible.
Yeah.
When Jesse and I are doing a video, we don't have to worry about making it clickbaity.
It's true.
That's a huge difference on YouTube. That's true. When you look at the titles on YouTube, so many times you're like, oh, that's a good title. And then you click on it. It's not exactly what you thought.
Right.
This is what you clicked on. This is what you get. That's what, Jesse and I do. It's because we don't have to be clickbaity.
Right. We don't rely on getting, millions of views that aren't necessarily, are from a bunch of 12-year-olds. We don't have to attract the 12-year-olds, and we don't have to pander to them.
Right.
We can pander to you very intelligent people who want to hear about what's happening in the world and not just like, whoa, guys, check this out. Whoa, cool, neat. We don't have to do that.
No.
And it's very nice to feel like we don't have to pander to 12-year-olds.
And don't forget about our podcast, because a show like this is great to listen to as a podcast. And if you haven't found them yet, they're on Stitcher. So you can go to Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, they're going to be there. And you can listen to us on TuneIn in the Tesla. I mean, I think that's the best way to listen, personally.
I think watching, sometimes there's some benefits. I do a lot of things.
Oh, but
with
I
my
just mean
hands.
if you're listening.
I'm just saying, if you're listening, you are missing out all of my hand.
True.
I'm Italian. I have hand things that I do. So you're missing out on that.
True.
Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Now you know.